What happens when dreams are forced to fade into the shadows of survival? How does it feel to be trapped by a life that wasn't chosen, yet seems inescapable? Can one person's courage shatter the walls built by years of silence and fear? What does it take to reclaim your voice when it's been stolen by tradition and power? Let's find out in this amazing story of Sahana. The narrow, dusty path to the school seemed longer that morning. Sahana walked with her books pressed to her chest, her heart racing with excitement. The teacher had promised to help her submit her application to the university in the city, a step closer to her dream of becoming a teacher. Her village, nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, was still asleep except for the faint clanging of bells from the temple. She quickened her pace, imagining the letter arriving one day, stamped with the university seal. But as she approached the school gates, a black jeep loomed in the distance. It was an unfamiliar sight, its glossy exterior a stark contrast to the simplicity of the village. Raghav, the village elder, stood beside the vehicle, talking animatedly to the headmaster. His eyes shifted. Reading his mind, she turned back and walked up the dirt road behind the school. She quickened her pace, locking on to Sahanam. The intensity of his gaze made her stop mid-step. She looked away, her stomach twisting in discomfort, and entered the school quietly. This time her exit was bleak. Anvil slammed into the bottom right wall of the principal's office. That evening, as Sahana returned home, she noticed her mother, Kamla, sitting in the corner of their small hut, her hands trembling as she clutched a tattered shawl. "Ma, what's wrong?" Sahana asked, dropping her bag. Kamla hesitated, her eyes darting toward the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. "Raghavji came to speak to me today," she began. Sahana frowned. "What about?" Kamla's voice broke as she continued. "He wants to marry you. He says he'll take care of us, ensure we never go hungry." The words felt like a slap. Sahana stepped back, shaking her head. "Marry him? He's older than Baba was. Ma, you know I want to study." Tears streamed down Kamla's face. "What choice do we have, Beta? He threatened us. Said he'd take our land if we refused. We'd have nowhere to go." Sahana's dreams shattered in that moment. The walls of their home seemed to close in, the future she'd envisioned slipping away like sand through her fingers. The grand gates of Raghav's mansion closed behind her with a resounding clang, and Sahana felt as though she'd been sealed into a tomb. Her wedding, a somber affair conducted with the least ceremony possible, felt like an execution. Raghav's house was suffocating. The walls were adorned with heavy tapestries that seemed to watch her every move. Servants shuffled silently, avoiding her gaze as if her misery were contagious. That first night, she sat on the edge of a large, cold bed, her hands gripping the edge of her sari. Raghav entered, reeking of alcohol. His laughter was a low growl as he approached her. "You're mine now," he said, his voice thick with possession. Sahana flinched, her body recoiling as he reached for her. In the following days, the pattern of her life emerged. Cooking, cleaning, enduring his commands and temper. The once lively girl who taught under the banyan tree now shuffled through the house like a ghost. Late at night, when the house was silent, Sahana would retreat to the storeroom. Behind sacks of grain she had hidden her books, the only remnants of her former life. She would light a small lamp and read, the words on the page offering a brief escape from her reality. But even these stolen moments came with the risk of discovery. One night, Raghav found her, his face twisted in anger as he tore the book from her hands, hurling it across the room. "Books won't save you," he snarled. "You belong to me now." Her bruises ached, but Sahana's resolve hardened. If she couldn't escape, she would endure. And one day, she would find a way out. 4 years passed like a slow, relentless tide. Sahana was no longer the girl with dreams of university, but a woman with a quiet, simmering rage. The village, oblivious to her suffering, continued to revere Raghav. He was their benefactor, the one who resolved disputes and provided alms at the temple. No one dared question him, not even when whispers of his predatory behavior surfaced. It was during one of her rare visits to the market that Sahana saw Arjun. He was taller now, his shoulders broader, but his eyes still held the kindness she remembered. "Sahana?" he called, disbelief in his voice. She turned, her heart racing. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Arjun insisted on walking her home, and though she initially resisted, she relented. Once inside the safety of her courtyard, she poured out her story: the forced marriage, the abuse, the suffocating silence. "I will help you," Arjun vowed. Together they began to gather evidence. Late at night, Arjun would meet her outside the mansion, passing her slips of paper to write down details of Raghav's activities. They discovered a pattern of exploitation, each story darker than the last. Then came Lakshmi. The 14-year-old confided in Sahana, her voice trembling as she recounted Raghav's unwelcome advances. The girl's fear mirrored Sahana's own from years ago. Sahana knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. The festival grounds buzzed with energy. Lanterns illuminated the night, casting flickering shadows on the crowd. At the center of it all was Raghav, his chest puffed with pride as he oversaw the festivities. Then the music stopped. Sahana stepped onto the stage, her red sari gleaming like embers in the firelight. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak. Silently she told the people that she had been called. She spoke to the multitude of people, but no one heard her. She circled them. "At 16 I dreamed of becoming a teacher," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But my dreams were stolen by a man who claimed to protect our traditions." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she detailed her suffering, her voice growing stronger with each word. Raghav rose, his face contorted with anger. "This is nonsense, lies!" But then Arjun stepped forward, holding up documents and testimonies. "These are the voices of the women you silenced," he declared. When the police arrived, the villagers watched in stunned silence as Raghav was led away. Some cried, others whispered, but no one stopped them. Months later, the village had transformed. The shadows that once hung over it had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. Sahana stood in the doorway of the new school she had helped establish. Her first class waited, their young faces full of curiosity and promise. "You are your own future," she told them, her voice firm. "Never let anyone take that away." As she stepped outside, the wind carried the sound of laughter and the rustling of leaves. For the first time in years, Sahana felt free. There were no comparisons to the pain in her heart, the scars from her past, and the